Daniel walked slowly through the wide streets of the alien bazaar. The colony world was alive with colors, lights, and sounds that mixed together like a storm. Voices rose from stalls where merchants shouted about their goods. Strange smells of cooked food, oil, and rare spices floated in the air. The bazaar was always crowded, filled with humans and many alien species. To Daniel, it was both exciting and exhausting. He had never liked the noise, but today he had a reason to be here. He was searching for something he could not yet explain. Daniel had saved some credits over many months of work in the docks. He was not rich, but he carried enough to buy something of value. Most people came here to buy tools, small machines, or food for the week. Daniel's steps, however, carried him toward the animal market, the place where creatures from distant worlds were sold. The animal market was louder than the rest of the bazaar. Cages lined the sides, some glowing with bright energy fields, others made of heavy bars. Inside were animals that looked both beautiful and strange. There were feathered beasts with wings as large as sails, small insect-like pets with glowing shells, and reptilian creatures that hissed when buyers passed. Children pressed close to see them, pointing with wide eyes. Wealthy buyers talked with merchants, bargaining over rare creatures. Daniel moved slowly past them, but his eyes kept searching for something different. Then, in the corner, he saw it. The cage was smaller than the others, and the creature inside looked weaker than the rest. It was a dragon, but not like the bright scaled ones Daniel had seen in old books or hollows. Its scales were pale white, almost shining in the shadows. Its body was thin, wings folded tight against its sides. The creature's eyes were red, but they looked dull, as if all strength had drained away. It lay on the floor of the cage, breathing slowly. Daniel felt something stir inside him. He could not explain why, but his heart pulled toward that cage. He stepped closer. The merchant standing nearby noticed his interest and laughed. "You want that one," the alien merchant said, his voice rough. "It is useless. Sick. Broken wings. No fire in its chest. Nobody wants it." Other buyers nearby turned their heads and laughed as well. A tall human shook his head. "Why waste money on that thing? It looks half dead." Another alien made a sound like a snort. "It is only pain. You buy it, you buy trouble." Daniel did not answer them. He only crouched down near the cage. The pale dragon lifted its head slowly, as if it had heard his silent thoughts. Their eyes met red against brown. For a moment, Daniel felt the noise of the market fade. In that gaze, he saw not weakness, but something deeper. The creature was not only in pain. It was waiting for someone. "How much?" Daniel asked, standing straight. The merchant blinked in surprise. "You are serious? This thing will die in a week. Better you take a young one, strong, ready to grow. Or maybe a battle beast with sharp teeth. But this one, no. Why throw away your credits?" Daniel's voice was steady. "How much?" The merchant shook his head, then gave a low price. It was less than Daniel had expected. The alien thought the human would walk away, but instead Daniel placed his credits on the counter without a word. Laughter rose again from those nearby. Some clapped their hands, others whispered, shaking their heads. "The fool bought it," one voice said. "He will cry when it dies in his arms." Daniel ignored them. The merchant unlocked the cage and handed over the creature. The pale dragon was light, almost too light, as Daniel carefully lifted it into his arms. Its body was warm but weak. He could feel its shallow breaths against his chest. The creature did not resist. Instead, it rested its head against his shoulder. Daniel felt a strange calmness spread inside him. It was as if the dragon trusted him in a way no one else ever had. He carried it through the market. People stared, some pointing, some still laughing. Daniel did not mind. To him, the noise no longer mattered. All that mattered was the soft weight in his arms, the fragile life he had chosen to protect. As he walked away from the busy stalls, he whispered softly, "You are safe now. I'll take care of you." The dragon's eyes closed, not in pain, but in rest. And for the first time since entering the bazaar, Daniel felt that his journey had truly begun. Daniel carried the pale dragon carefully through the dusty streets on his way home. People still looked at him as he walked past, some shaking their heads, some laughing behind his back. But Daniel kept walking, holding the creature close. He lived in a small room above the docks, a place simple and quiet. It was not much, but it was safe. When he reached his room, he laid the dragon gently on a soft blanket. The creature shifted weakly, its red eyes opening for a moment before closing again. Daniel sat beside it, thinking hard. He had never cared for a dragon before. He had read about them in old stories, but this was real. The first days were difficult. The dragon refused to eat. Daniel bought meat from the market, fresh water, and even rare herbs, but the creature only turned its head away. At night, it made soft, pained sounds, and Daniel stayed awake, whispering calm words to it. "You are safe now," he would say, his voice gentle. "No one will hurt you. You are not alone." Most people would have given up. The neighbors told him he was wasting his time. One man laughed and said, "Better sell it for parts before it dies." But Daniel refused. He could not explain why, but something deep in his heart told him not to abandon this dragon. On the third night, something changed. Daniel sat near the dragon, holding a small piece of meat in his hand. He did not push it forward, only waited. The dragon lifted its head slowly, eyes dull but curious. It sniffed the air, then with great effort opened its mouth and took the food. Daniel smiled for the first time in days. "That's it? You are stronger than they think." From that moment, the dragon began to eat little by little. Its strength grew slowly. Daniel kept feeding it, cleaning its scales, and speaking to it as if it were a friend. The dragon began to respond in small ways. When Daniel entered the room, it would lift its head. When he touched its back gently, it would close its eyes in comfort. One evening, Daniel sat near the window, watching the stars outside. The dragon crawled closer, dragging its weak body until it rested near his feet. Daniel looked down in surprise. He reached out, and the dragon pressed its head against his hand. He felt warmth spread through him, not just from touch but from something deeper. It was like the dragon was sharing a piece of its heart with him. Daniel whispered, "You are not just an animal. You understand me, don't you?" The dragon gave a soft sound, almost like a sigh, as if answering. Daniel smiled and said, "Then I'll give you a name. Snow. Because your scales are white like snow." From that day, the bond between them grew stronger. Snow followed Daniel with its eyes wherever he went. When Daniel was sad or tired, the dragon would move closer, resting against him. And sometimes, when Daniel touched its scales, he felt something strange, a lightness in his thoughts, a calm that gave him strength. Weeks passed, and Snow grew healthier. Its wings were still broken, and it could not fly, but the dullness in its eyes faded. Red eyes now shone with quiet life. Its breathing was stronger, its body no longer weak. But with change came whispers. People in the colony noticed the dragon had not died. Neighbors saw Daniel walking with it in the small yard. Some still laughed, but others began to whisper. A few said albino dragons were cursed. Others said they were dangerous, tied to old legends of hidden power. Daniel ignored their words. To him, Snow was not a curse or a danger. Snow was a friend, a life he had saved when no one else cared. One afternoon, as Daniel rested in his room, a group of boys outside shouted up at his window. "Hey, fool! Still wasting time with that sick dragon? It will never be strong. You're dreaming if you think it will fly." Daniel looked out but did not answer. Snow was resting beside him, its head on his arm. He whispered, "Let them laugh. They do not see what I see." Snow opened its eyes and looked at him, as if it understood. That night, as Daniel lay awake, he thought about the strange feeling he had when he touched Snow. It was not just calmness. It was as if the dragon was sharing something more, an unseen bond, like a thread connecting their thoughts. Sometimes, Daniel even felt he knew what Snow wanted before it moved. The thought gave him both wonder and fear. What if the legends were true? What if Snow was more than an ordinary dragon? But Daniel decided not to fear. He looked at the dragon, sleeping peacefully beside him. "No matter what they say, Snow," he whispered, "I will stay with you." The pale dragon's tail moved slightly, curling closer to him, as if sealing a silent promise between them. And so, the bond began, not only of care, but of something deeper, something neither Daniel nor the world around him was ready to understand. The colony was a place where rumors traveled faster than ships. It did not take long for the story of Daniel's albino dragon to spread. At first, people only laughed. They told one another how the foolish dock worker had wasted his savings on a dying beast. But weeks passed, and the laughter grew weaker. The dragon did not die. Instead, it lived. It grew stronger. Neighbors began to notice small changes. They saw Snow lifting its head proudly, scales glimmering faintly in the sun. They saw Daniel walking with it in the yard, his hand resting gently on its neck. They whispered to each other in low voices. "Strange," one man said. "The creature should have been gone by now." "Albino dragons," another answered, "are said to carry something hidden. Old power, old secrets." Most laughed off such talk, but some listened more carefully. Daniel did not care about the whispers. His focus was only on Snow. Each day he cleaned its scales, fed it carefully, and spoke to it as if it were a friend. Snow grew healthier, its eyes shining with sharp red light. Even though its wings were broken, the dragon stood taller now, no longer weak. But Daniel could not ignore the strange moments that kept happening. One morning, he woke from a dream with his heart racing. He had seen images in his sleep: bright fire, wide skies, a dragon soaring high. When he opened his eyes, he found Snow awake, staring at him closely. It was as if the dragon had shared the dream with him. Another time, Daniel was walking through the docks when a heavy container nearly slipped from the lift above. Before it fell, Snow raised its head suddenly from across the yard, and Daniel felt a rush of warning in his chest. He stepped back just as the container crashed where he had stood. Workers nearby gasped, but Daniel only looked at Snow, his heart pounding. It was happening more often. The bond between them was not just friendship. Snow seemed to sense danger, and Daniel felt it too. He spoke of it to no one. Still, rumors grew stronger. One evening, two old men at the market argued loudly. Albino dragons are cursed, one said. They bring misfortune. The other shook his head. No, they are rare. They are said to see the unseen. A man who wins the trust of such a beast may gain more than protection. He may gain power beyond belief. Daniel heard their voices as he passed, carrying food for Snow. He did not stop to argue. To him, Snow was not a curse, not a tool of power. Snow was simply a friend who had trusted him when no one else did. But deep inside, he could not deny what he felt. Something was changing between them. That night, Daniel sat on the floor of his room, Snow resting nearby. The dragon was awake, its eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Daniel touched its head gently. "Do you feel it too?" he whispered. "This connection. When I dream, you dream. When I fear, you fear. It is as if we share one heart." Snow gave a low, soft sound, like a hum. It pressed its head against his hand, and in that moment Daniel felt warmth flow through him. His mind grew clear, as if the dragon had brushed away all shadows. For a long time, Daniel stayed there, lost in that silent exchange. He did not need words. He knew Snow understood. The next day, more whispers reached him. A group of merchants at the docks spoke when they thought he was not listening. "They say the boy and the dragon are linked. Do you not see the way it looks at him? As if it hears his thoughts?" Another replied, "Legends speak of such things. A bond between man and beast that is deeper than voice. Dangerous. If true, it could change much." Daniel walked away, carrying his tools, pretending not to hear. But his thoughts grew heavy. Was it dangerous? Was Snow meant for something more than he could understand? That evening, Daniel sat on the roof of his small home, looking at the stars. Snow lay beside him, wings stretched but broken, eyes glowing faintly as it too looked upward. The night was quiet, yet Daniel felt something strong inside him. He remembered all the laughter, all the words of mockery. People had called him foolish. They had told him the dragon would die. And yet here they were, side by side, stronger together. Daniel whispered, "They do not know you, Snow. They do not see what I see. You are not pain. You are not curse. You are hope." Snow's red eyes turned toward him, and for a brief moment Daniel thought he saw something deeper in them, something vast and old, like the memory of skies it had once flown. He felt his heart race, his breath catch. He did not yet understand, but he knew this truth: the bond between them was growing. And with it, something was awakening, something that others might soon fear, but that he could not abandon. For Daniel, the whispers of power were not lies. They were only the first signs of what was to come. Life in the colony was never easy. The world was young, its cities built quickly to house traders, miners, and travelers. Ships came and went each day, carrying goods and people across the stars. But behind the flow of trade was always the shadow of danger. Raiders hunted the space lanes, striking weak colonies to steal supplies. Daniel had heard the warnings before, but he never thought the threat would come so close. It began with distant news. A group of raiders had been seen in nearby systems, attacking small outposts. Merchants in the bazaar spoke in worried voices. "They will come here next," one said. "This colony is rich with goods. Easy prey." Daniel listened but said nothing. His thoughts were not on raiders. His thoughts were on Snow. The dragon was stronger now, walking with steady steps around the yard. Its broken wings still hung heavy, but its eyes were sharp. The bond between them grew each day. Daniel felt as if Snow could sense his moods, and at times, Snow seemed to guide his feelings too. One evening, as Daniel worked in the docks, alarms sounded across the colony. The sky above filled with the deep echo of warning horns. Ships appeared on the horizon, raiders, dark and fast, breaking through the atmosphere. Panic spread. People ran through the streets, carrying children, locking doors, shouting for soldiers. Merchants closed their stalls, dropping goods in the rush. Daniel stood frozen for a moment, then felt a sharp tug in his chest. It was Snow. Even from far away, the bond carried its voice. He ran home as fast as he could. Dust rose behind his boots, the colony echoing with cries of fear. When he reached his small room, Snow was already awake, its head high, eyes glowing bright. The dragon's body trembled, not in weakness but in alertness. Daniel knelt beside it. "You feel it too, don't you? The danger?" Snow gave a low growl, deep and steady. Its broken wings twitched as if trying to rise. Daniel felt a strange energy, a spark in his own chest. It was not fear, it was strength flowing from Snow into him. Outside, chaos grew. Soldiers armed with rifles gathered in the streets, shouting orders. Families hid in underground shelters. The colony had weapons, but no one trusted they were enough. Raiders were known for their cruelty and strength. Many whispered the colony would fall. Daniel carried Snow outside, though many shouted at him. "What are you doing? Hide, fool. That beast will not save you." But Snow lifted its head higher, eyes fixed on the sky where the raider ships were descending. The bond pulsed in Daniel's mind, filling him with courage he had never felt before. The first blast came like thunder. Fire streaked through the air as the raiders fired on the colony walls. Soldiers returned fire, but the enemy was fast, moving like shadows. Daniel felt the ground shake beneath him. Snow gave a loud, piercing roar. It was the first time Daniel had heard such a sound from the dragon. It echoed through the colony, cutting through fear like a blade. People stopped running for a moment and turned to see the pale creature standing tall beside Daniel. "Impossible," someone whispered. "That weak thing lives." Snow's roar shook again, stronger this time. Its red eyes glowed bright, almost burning. The bond filled Daniel's mind with visions of skies filled with fire, of dragons soaring, of strength hidden deep in fragile wings. Daniel realized something then. Snow was not afraid. Snow was waiting. He placed his hand on the dragon's neck. "I'm with you," he whispered. The raiders advanced, their ships landing just beyond the colony gates. Dark figures marched forward, weapons raised. Panic spread again, but Snow stepped forward, broken wings twitching as if remembering flight. Daniel felt his heart pound with the dragon's heartbeat. He knew they could not hide anymore. He knew Snow was not the weak creature the merchants had laughed at. Something greater was stirring inside it, and inside him too. The colony braced for battle, but no one understood that the real battle was about to change. For in that moment, Daniel realized that the albino dragon he had bought in pain might not only survive, it might rise. And with it, so would he. The colony shook with the sound of battle. Explosions thundered in the distance as raider ships fired on the outer walls. Alarms blared from tall towers, and smoke rose into the night sky. People hid in their homes or ran to the shelters underground. Soldiers lined the streets, their faces pale with fear as they prepared to defend their families. Daniel stood in the middle of it all, Snow at his side. The albino dragon's red eyes glowed bright, its pale scales shimmering faintly in the firelight. Daniel felt the bond between them beating stronger than ever, like a steady drum inside his chest. Snow growled, a deep sound that made even the soldiers turn their heads. For weeks, many had mocked Daniel for keeping the dragon alive. Now they stared in silence, unsure of what they were seeing. The first wave of raiders broke through the colony gates. Dark figures rushed forward, shouting as they carried weapons. The soldiers opened fire, and the air filled with bursts of light. The ground shook under the clash, dust rising into the air. Daniel felt fear press on him, but at the same time, another force rose inside him. It was Snow's presence, steady, unshaken. The dragon's heartbeat pulsed through the bond, telling him not to fear. Snow stepped forward, its wings twitching weakly. The broken bones had never healed, yet Daniel felt something building inside them, like hidden fire waiting to escape. The raiders drew closer. One of them pointed at Snow and laughed. "Look! The fool brings a broken pet to the fight." But the laughter ended when Snow raised its head high and let out a roar that shook the street. The sound rolled like thunder, deep and endless. Windows rattled, and even the soldiers felt it in their bones. The raiders paused, their steps faltering. Daniel placed his hand on Snow's neck. "You can do it," he whispered. "Show them who you are." Snow's eyes flared with light. The pale dragon spread its wings wide. For weeks those wings had been nothing but broken weight, yet now they glowed faintly, edges shimmering as if fire burned beneath the skin. With a sudden, powerful motion, Snow beat them against the air. Dust and wind rushed through the street. The dragon rose. For the first time since Daniel had seen it in that dark cage, Snow lifted off the ground. Slowly at first, then higher, the pale wings holding steady against the air. The people below gasped, their eyes wide in disbelief. "The broken one flies," someone whispered. Snow roared again, and this time the roar carried more than sound, it carried force. The raiders stumbled back, their courage breaking. The dragon soared above the colony, its pale scales glowing against the dark sky, its eyes burning like red stars. Daniel felt himself lifted as well. Not in body, but in spirit. His heart beat in rhythm with Snow's wings. He could feel what the dragon felt, the wind rushing past, the strength rising within. The bond was no longer just quiet understanding. It was alive, burning, real. The raiders opened fire, bolts of light streaking through the sky. But Snow moved with surprising speed, weaving through the blasts. With a sweep of its wings, the dragon dived low, and the force of its movement knocked several raiders to the ground. Soldiers of the colony shouted with new hope, their fear replaced by awe. Snow landed in front of the advancing raiders, its body tall, its wings stretched wide. A wave of power rolled off it, pressing against everyone nearby. The raiders froze. They had faced soldiers before, weapons before, but never this. One soldier whispered, "We thought it was weak. But look at it now." Daniel stood at Snow's side, his hand still resting on its scales. He looked at the raiders without fear. For the first time in his life, he felt stronger than them. Not because of weapons, not because of numbers, but because of trust, because he and Snow were one. The raiders hesitated, and in that hesitation the soldiers of the colony pushed forward with new strength. The tide of battle began to change. Snow lifted its head high, roaring once more. The sound echoed through the colony, rolling into the night sky. It was not just a roar of battle. It was a roar of freedom, of awakening. The people who had laughed before, the ones who called Daniel a fool, now stood in silence. Their eyes followed the pale dragon that had once lain weak and broken in a cage. Now it was alive, strong, proud, and beautiful. Daniel whispered softly, only for Snow to hear, "They were wrong about you. They were wrong about us." Snow's tail swept across the ground, and its eyes glowed with a power that could no longer be denied. The albino dragon had awakened. And the colony would never forget the night they first saw it rise. The night was quiet when Daniel woke to the sound of something heavy moving above the hills. The albino dragon beside him stirred too, its eyes glowing faintly in the dark. For weeks, the bond between man and dragon had grown stronger, and now they could almost sense each other's feelings. The dragon felt unease, and Daniel felt it too. Something was coming, something that would test everything they had built together. At dawn, the hills shook. Metal ships from distant stars appeared above the valley, their silver bodies flashing in the sun. People from the nearby village screamed and ran, pointing at the sky. The ships circled like hawks, scanning the ground. Daniel understood at once. These were not peaceful visitors. They had come for the dragon. The albino dragon raised its head high, letting out a deep sound that echoed across the land. It was not fear in its voice but challenge. Daniel stood beside it, his heart beating fast. He remembered how people had laughed at him when he first bought the dragon in pain. Now the same dragon stood tall, ready to fight for its home. And Daniel knew he could not let it fight alone. A door opened in one of the ships, and strange figures stepped out. They were tall, thin, and covered in shining armor. Their eyes were cold, their hands carrying long rods that glowed faintly. The villagers hid in silence, too afraid to move. But Daniel stepped forward. He was only human, but he felt taller than ever standing beside the albino dragon. The first beam shot from the rod, striking the ground with a burst of light. The dragon jumped into the air, its great white wings spreading wide. Daniel held onto the saddle they had built together, pulling himself onto its back. The crowd gasped as the man and dragon rose into the sky, heading straight toward the ships. For the first time, the village saw their bond not as madness but as something powerful and true. The battle in the sky began. The ships fired bright beams, but the dragon moved with grace. Its white scales reflected the light, making it hard for the enemies to aim. Daniel felt every shift of its body, guiding it with gentle touches. They were no longer two beings but one. Together, they weaved through the blasts, rising higher until they faced the largest ship. The dragon opened its mouth, releasing a stream of white fire. The flame was not ordinary, it shone like the heart of a star. It struck the ship's side, cutting through its metal like paper. The crowd below cheered, their fear turning to awe. Daniel tightened his grip, urging the dragon forward again. He could feel the dragon's strength, but he could also sense its pain. The battle was taking much from it. The other ships moved closer, surrounding them. It looked hopeless, but Daniel remembered something. The dragon was not only fire and wings. It was intelligence, old and deep. Closing his eyes, he tried to connect more strongly. Images filled his mind: mountains, rivers, skies untouched by ships. The dragon showed him its memories, its knowledge of the land and the sky. With this shared vision, Daniel understood. They could win not by strength alone but by wisdom. He guided the dragon high above the ships, into the blinding sunlight. From below, the ships tried to follow, but their machines struggled in the glare. At the right moment, Daniel tapped the dragon's side, and they dove together, falling like a comet. The dragon's wings cut the air with thunder, and its fire lit the sky. The enemy ships broke formation, unable to match the speed. One by one, the dragon struck them, fire and claws tearing through their armor. The villagers watched with wide eyes, unable to believe what they were seeing. The man they once mocked was now their protector, and the dragon they feared was their savior. Children pointed to the sky with shining faces, and even the oldest elders bowed their heads. Humanity was not weak, not when joined with such courage and bond. At last, the final ship fell, crashing beyond the hills in a shower of sparks. The sky grew quiet again, and the albino dragon landed gently on the valley floor. Daniel slid off its back, his legs shaking, his face covered in sweat. The dragon lowered its head to him, as if thanking him for his trust. Daniel placed his hand on its white scales, feeling the heat still pulsing through its body. They had survived. More than that, they had won. The villagers slowly came out from hiding. No one laughed anymore. They approached with respect, offering food and water for both man and dragon. Some even touched the dragon's side, their fear turning to wonder. Daniel looked around, knowing that this was only the beginning. The world had seen their strength, and soon others would come. But he was ready. Together, he and the dragon would face whatever came next. That night, the stars were bright. Daniel sat beside the dragon, looking at the sky. He knew the battle was not the end but the start of something greater. The albino dragon lifted its head, watching the same stars. Man and dragon, side by side, waiting for the next challenge. The ending was not yet written, but it was clear beyond belief. It would be. The morning after the sky battle was calm, but Daniel knew the peace would not last. The broken ship still lay scattered beyond the hills, glowing faintly in the grass. Smoke rose into the sky, and strange sparks flashed from their shattered metal. The villagers stayed far from the wrecks, whispering that more enemies might come. Daniel also felt it. The fight was not over. The albino dragon sensed it too, its bright eyes watching the horizon with care. Daniel sat by the dragon's side, running his hand across its white scales. They were warm, but he could feel the deep exhaustion in the creature. The fight had taken much from it. Still, the dragon stood tall, proud, and unbroken. Daniel whispered softly, "We are not done yet, are we?" The dragon let out a low sound, not sad, not fearful, but steady. By midday, the sky changed again. A new shadow appeared above, larger than all the ships before. It was a massive vessel, shaped like a dark moon, with a ring of glowing light around it. The villagers gasped and began to run once more. Some cried that no dragon could fight such a thing. But Daniel stood still, his hand resting on the dragon's neck. He did not feel fear. Instead, he felt something stronger, the certainty that he and the dragon were meant for this moment. The giant ship opened at its base, and a figure descended slowly, wrapped in silver armor brighter than any star. It was not like the other enemies. This one was taller, stronger, and its voice carried across the valley without a sound system. "Return the creature. It does not belong to you. It belongs to us." The dragon's wings opened wide, shining white in the sunlight. The villagers fell silent, waiting. Daniel stepped forward, his voice steady. "The dragon does not belong to you. It chose to stay here. It is free." The figure tilted its head as if surprised that a human would speak with such boldness. Then it raised its hand. A wave of force rushed across the valley, shaking trees and stones. The dragon leapt into the air, Daniel climbing onto its back in one motion. The final battle had begun. High above the valley, man and dragon faced the enormous vessel. Blinding beams shot out, brighter than lightning, but the dragon twisted and turned, avoiding them with grace. Daniel held on, guiding it with small touches, their bond stronger than ever. The villagers below raised their hands to the sky, cheering with all their voices. They no longer feared. They believed. The dragon released its white fire, brighter than before, hitting the vessel's shield. The shield rippled but did not break. Daniel closed his eyes, reaching deeper into the bond. Images filled his mind again, not only of the dragon's memories but something new, images of stars, ancient skies, battles fought long ago. The dragon was older than anyone had guessed. It carried within it the strength of ages. Daniel understood. The dragon was not just an animal. It was a guardian, one that had waited for the right partner to awaken its true power. And now, with humanity beside it, that power was ready. He whispered, "Together." The dragon roared, and its roar carried not only sound but light. Its entire body began to shine with a white brilliance that filled the sky. The villagers covered their eyes, but they could still see the glow through their hands. Daniel held tight, feeling the dragon's strength pour through him as if they were one being. The dragon released its fire again, but this time it was different. It was no longer just flame. It was a stream of pure energy, as if the stars themselves had answered their call. It struck the massive vessel, and the shield shattered like glass. The armor cracked, sparks flew, and the dark shape fell apart in the air. With a final burst, it broke into pieces, falling harmlessly into the sea far beyond the hills. The valley shook with the sound of victory. The dragon descended slowly, its glow fading, landing gently on the grass. Daniel slid down, his legs weak but his heart full. The villagers ran to him, shouting his name, praising the dragon. Children hugged the dragon's legs, their fear gone forever. Elders bowed low, saying, "This is beyond belief." Daniel looked at the albino dragon, and the dragon looked back at him. They had done what no one thought possible. They had faced the strongest enemy, and they had won. Not because of power alone, but because of trust, bond, and courage. That night, the valley celebrated. Fires were lit, songs were sung, and for the first time, the villagers did not laugh at Daniel. They honored him as a protector, and they honored the dragon as a guardian of all. Daniel sat quietly by the dragon's side, smiling as he watched the joy around him. The stars above seemed brighter than ever. Daniel raised his eyes to them, knowing this was not the end. More challenges would come, but he and the dragon were ready. Humanity had stood beside a creature from another world and had not only survived but triumphed. In the silence of the night, Daniel whispered, "They laughed when I bought you, but now they believe." The albino dragon lowered its great head and touched him gently with its nose. In that moment, man and dragon were more than friends. They were legends, their story written in the sky, an ending beyond belief.